So I think in terms of disclaimer, we mentioned, although it will be hard to remove the role of governments in this discussion is aimed to suggest solutions that can be applied by individuals. Number two, we assume that those who need to apply these solutions have access to internet as well as access to this discussion. And three, we assume that those who are in the position to listen will be able to try get the message to those who need to hear it and who are not fortunate enough to maybe listen to what it is that we are discussing.
But we are no experts. Let's just be clear. We are just two guys who are curious about questions, want to discuss it, try to find solutions to that in the best way we can with our limited time of doing research and our resources. And I think in terms of this discussion, if I give counter arguments, and I guess if you give counter arguments, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's our opinions. It's just sometimes playing devil's advocate and getting that other side's what would be the opinion of the counter argument.
Great. And with that, I think obviously just to talk about the title, which is unequal distribution of wealth within SA. I've got a little part on my side, which in terms of, I think, not converting this to a blog post. Depending on what the discussions that we have on here and stuff like that, probably put it into some other form of content. But it will be on, I think, I actually worked on my personal website recently, and there's like a place where I've just had discussions. So it's just longer discussions like this. I've had some Katja, Rory, a couple of other friends and stuff like that. So yeah, do you want to start us off, Marcel? What is it? Oh yeah, I think another thing to mention is that we've only had 2 weeks to look at this. And in reality, it was 2 weeks from the time we decided to think about this up until now. But in terms of research, it's probably 2 or 3 days before today that there was actually the hardcore stuff there. So yeah, this is what I guess the best that we could come up with the amount of time that we put in. As you said, we're not experts or anything. So I think you can start, Marcel. Let's hear what you have to say.
Yeah, to add to your point that you had over the time that we had, like I think in terms of the effective hours, it was maybe like 3, 4, 5 hours that I spent on this. And it's in the majority of the part just figuring out what is the right question to ask. It took me I thought, okay, this is maybe quite specific. We can start off with this. And that's when I started asking the question. And I was like, oh, goodness, this is it's quite hard to ask the right question. I ended up, the term wealth, we assume that it's income-based, but it's actually quite broader than that. It's what you own. And if you want to get statistics of everything, that's what I wanted to get the global overview and see how that fits with the individual in the end. It was quite hard to get any wealth statistics because it's usually one that in trusts. It's a really high net worth. That's why, like with the richest families, it's quite hard to get their wealth because it's usually distributed over a lot of people that are part of the trust. So I ended up with incomes, and the question that was asked was specific for South Africa. And in the end, after doing a lot of Googling, I ended up with quite a nice paper that sums up the scope of what is the problem with inequality and why it's so hard to solve it. It's a journal paper by the Helen Suzman Foundation written by Gavin Keaton, who's an associate professor at Rhodes University Economic Department. Basically, he explained the whole matter and the arguments and the counter arguments, and it's actually written really well, not in this expensive language that you usually get with journals. In the end, I can actually go through, we can talk hours about it. The conclusion that was eventually made was that, and this statistic it was really significant. He states that the report by Statistics South Africa shows that qualitative changes are required to educational attainments as much as quantitative changes. 42% of South African workers with less than a matric qualification are unemployed, but unemployment remains as high as 34% for those with a matric certificate. For those with a matric and some tertiary qualification, unemployment is 14%, and if you are a university graduate, it's 5.2%. Now, it is clear that the more educated you are, the higher your probability will be that you'll have a job. Now, we're not then even talking about your income, but at least you have a job, which would make you better off than the person without a job. It's also clear that the majority of all jobs that have been created from 1994 until 2004. So it says 76% of all the jobs that were created in South Africa in that time were people that were semi-qualified to highly qualified. So there's no chance for someone that is not educated to be part of the workforce. So I think if we have this discussion, then we obviously need to focus on the people that aren't educated, because those are the people that get left behind. And that increases the inequality.
But now, in terms of education and stuff like that, are you saying that one, they need to have the knowledge itself, or they need to get some sort of paper, which is, let's say, a degree or diploma, which enables them to get a job? Because that's actually something I spoke about today, actually, on my podcast, was about the fact that a lot of people can't actually afford education. But thanks to things like the internet, getting that information is available. There are places like, Coursera, edX, FutureLearn, a lot of these online platforms which let you peruse courses for free. So you can get the likes of courses from Stanford, MIT, whatever you call it, for free. But the only thing is that not everyone can afford to pay for the certificate it comes with. But you can still take it for free. It's just that you won't get a certificate. So in that sense, I think that's where a lot of people feel discouraged, that if I want to get, or the thing is, people say, go study something. But in order to get that certificate, a lot comes with the certificate, meaning you have to enroll, meaning you have to pay for tuition fees, meaning that you have to, forego getting an income so that you go study, and hopefully 2 years down the line, you get a job. And I guess if you are lucky to do that very early or straight after school, it's great. But for some people, if they want to change the situation right now, it can be very difficult to say, well, I need to go get an education. And that's why I'm asking, playing a bit of devil's advocate here, to say, when you say they need to get educated, do they need to go to some institution and get a certificate to prove that? And even then, there's sort of a sacrifice in order for them to go and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it really depends on in what sector you want to go. There are some sectors, like, for example, coding is maybe the best example, that it's quite easy to prove that you're competent with coding by just doing a test. That's to give the listeners some background. The current job I have, they employed me because of the test that I completed. Maybe they also looked at my educational background. I think most probably they did, especially in part of the talking process. But for me to get the job, I had to first finish that test. This is for a formal job. In terms of coding, if you want to contribute to repositories, to packages that get developed, you get these open source packages that get funded. And there you can contribute, and then an expert that is part of that company that makes sure that packages are high quality. They review your code, and then if it's approved, like the amount of contributions you make will allow you to, or the amount of issues that you fulfill with this coding problem, you get paid for that. And for that, you don't need to have, for you to contribute, you don't need to have a paid for anything. So I think in that space, I think that's one of the first spaces you'll see that. I think tertiary educations are getting scared because coding, all the biggest guys, the richest people like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Elon Musk. Yeah. Although they had papers, Bill Gates he never completed university. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. I think Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos did it, but they never used it, or at least not to build their own companies. They built the companies by coding themselves, and you see that more and more, that people drop out of university because they're good with coding, and they see that they can make money just by coding and contributing to all these solving problems in the digital sphere. So I think that would be the easiest way for someone that's in a situation where they do not have a job, but they know they have at least time to educate themselves. If you have, and I think that's the biggest issue with someone that's in a poor situation, they need to have a laptop. Or a computer of sorts to be able to do this. And it's expensive. Like, I think for Europeans or any Western country, first world country, hearing that a laptop is expensive, it's weird to hear that. I could imagine. But if you're in a country as South Africa, a laptop is, I think it's like double minimum wage if you want to have a good laptop.
I do believe in that. Like, definitely you do need a laptop, but I think, like, let's say I did a revision of Python, which is the data visualization portion using Seaborn. And that was on a platform called Kaggle. I did not have to download a single piece of software or anything. As long as I had an internet browser, it was possible for me to do that. There's obviously things like Jupyter Notebooks, which you can also just have an internet browser. Obviously, you might need or your processing time might be affected and stuff like that. But if it comes to learning and stuff like that, it is possible to learn coding on free platforms such as I mentioned, these ones that I've mentioned, Kaggle, Coursera, edX, FutureLearn. You can even do it on your cell phone. It's not that it's ideal, but if you really want to get started. But as you mentioned, things like we are struggling with, obviously in South Africa, is things like, as you say, data already, it's super high. So like, even if you want to, let's say, educate yourself through some sort of platform. But one of the things I did mention here is that obviously, like, this discussion, the fact that we're having it on YouTube means that it's probably going to be people to the lower middle class to middle class people which will hear this and be able to discuss and mention this. But there are people in the middle class which are suffering, I guess, with wealth problems. As much as they're earning a lot of income, their net worth isn't great, which is obviously I'll speak into later. Sorry to disrupt you and stuff like that. But I think there's I don't want to call it an excuse. There's obviously going to be a portion of people which say, well, I don't have. And there's a certain portion of people which can, let's say, increase their wealth by, as you mentioned, doing things like, well, okay, fine, I've got a laptop, I only use it to stream Netflix, but I'm working at a store which doesn't pay me enough. Pick up this laptop that you have and then go learn how to code. There are people that I work with here at Agron, this guy is in England. He's my manager, he's one of our team leads, and he's got a degree in music, but he taught himself how to code. As you mentioned, Elon Musk, and funny enough that you mentioned him because it's in the blog post and the podcast that I had today. You were right. He did finish his degree. He actually did a master's. He did an undergrad in physics as well as economics. But he signed up to do his PhD in physics. And 2 days into the course, that's when the tech boom happened. And he decided that he's going to leave his PhD and go to start this whole coding venture. And he started a startup with his brother. And, in the 7 years from when he dropped out to, I think it was in a 7-year period, he dropped out, and in the 7-year period, he made like $122 million from 2 companies. And they were startups, which were basically founded off of his coding skills, which he taught himself at the age of 10. So
that's I think the thing that people need to consider. I know we're diving into coding quite deep right now. We'll now get out of it. But I think if you're in a first situation where you don't even have a laptop, it's good to start learning like through your phone. Again, the assumption is that you have access to internet. So if you have access to internet and a smartphone, you can actually learn to start coding. But what people need to realize, if you're in a poor situation, it's all about the flywheel effect. The moment you have enough money to buy yourself a laptop, you're much further in the process of getting it. So let's say you've got a laptop and you're good enough to code and to contribute to these repositories, or even start your own application or whatever. I would say, like, you first contribute, get money, and you invest in that. It's all about getting this flywheel going. So you've got a laptop, you get enough money to get even more data. Eventually, you learn so much that you start your own application, you start your own company, and it's all about getting that.
I'm very happy you say that, because that's a big part of my discussion when obviously I let you finish, is I want to put the pressure on the middle class, the people which are actually listening to this stuff, the you and me and stuff like that, to realize that it's actually us which is going to get this whole wheel going. People which can afford the laptop, instead of, buying the newest cell phone, buy the laptop, learn the skill, start your business, employ someone else that they can at least have money so they can buy a laptop, start the business. And it's going to be definitely around, as you said, like this flywheel whole system. A lot of it for me, and I'll obviously explain how I got there, that discussion really depends on the middle class doing it, if we really feel like we want to actually solve this problem. So let me let you continue. I'm just getting excited because it seems like we're aligned in our thinking.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think the middle class, especially if you think about, once you buy a new laptop, you say that your old laptop is too slow or something. It's good enough for someone else. All my previous laptops were sponsored to people that needed it, and while it was of no use for me anymore. So I know that the laptops that I actually got my first laptop when I went to university, and I still know where that other laptop is. It's still being used, so I know it still has a function although it's absolutely useless for me now, it still has a use for someone else, and that's good to know that it still has a function until the end, and I think that could help even the poorest of the poor to get them in this educational system. But yeah, this is only focused on coding. Getting back to the question of getting a degree or paper, it's much harder for things like management. Like you do a management course, you get dropped into management, economics and such. They want to see the paper to see whether you're competent, because it's quite hard to write a test or set up a test to see if someone else is competent or not. In most cases, you hear that quite a lot. Say they study for 3 to 4 years just to get into the workplace, and they learn everything from scratch. You get that degree, you have a certain background, but it doesn't help you actually with that job. That's something you learn through the process, and maybe you connect the dots with the degree. But like this is not to insult anyone that has a degree. If you study, you do study proper stuff, but I think it's when you start working, you start connecting the dots with your experience to get that knowledge that you got through studying. I think that's how it works. At least that's from my own experience, where you connect the dots once you see, okay, that's how it applies to practice. So I think if you're a very analytical person, I think coming from a poor situation, there's a way of getting out. But if you're creative, for example, if you're more let's call it, it's a topic that's the left or right brain, it's a stupid topic, but let's say you're the right brain, which is creative or seen as creative, then I think it's much harder. You get people with so many talents, and if you're not the analytical type, it's much harder, I think. Maybe it's only hard because I'm an analytical person.
The thing is,
maybe it's not that hard.
I think one of the things that it's not something I mentioned, but as you mentioned that now, I didn't think about it, but it's a very good point that you bring it up. I think the reason why it's easier for people who have the analytical gift to earn income is that many businesses are centered around solving certain problems. And the thing is, it might not be obvious to some people, but like as we've mentioned, obviously we've spoken a lot about coding and tech and stuff like that. As much as Facebook is great, like we've started to see the real intentions of Facebook. Facebook was nice because it gave you all the nice fuzzy feelings of the right brain, but the left brain side of it was able to say, well, let's build a profile on you because it's going to be the biggest ad agency in the world. It's solving the problems of people to say, well, I don't know how to get my product into China. Or like, oh, well, fine, let's run ads against people in China with a certain profile and stuff like that. This is your target market. And that's why I'm saying that a lot of businesses like mathematics and so coding, doctors, or whatever it is, if you want to talk about big money jobs and careers, it's all around problem solving at the end of the day. And not unfortunately, I think creative people do solve problems, but the thing is that I guess if you want to link your creativity to money, you sort of can make something that's beautiful, but then that's where you start talking about like there's a top percentage which are super talented. But if you are creative, there are creative ways of solving problems. And that's how maybe people can get sort of into the niche, but the money is going to follow the problems at the end of the day. It's solving problems at scale that help you, I guess, become wealthier. The fact, if you think about Facebook, if you think about it, okay, fine, you can say, cool, there's analytics, but before analytics, there wasn't anything. But he was able to put this application in billions of people's hands, and that's scale at the end of the day. Jeff Bezos is able to put products in many people's hands because of his distribution networks. And with the distribution networks came a lot of other things. So he's able to obviously solve a lot of distribution problems. And that's how Amazon is doing well. I don't know, you can sort of take any sort of company. Netflix, what are they doing? You get bored, that's a problem for you. And you now solve it by going onto Netflix. So that's why I guess a lot of left or let's say analytical people would find careers better than normal. But that's the end of the day. That's your job every single day. If there wasn't a problem at your workplace that you have to solve or do something about, they wouldn't need you.
Sure. Let's take another, because we're taking a lot of analytical examples. An example of someone that's I think he's not analytical, doesn't come over as analytical, is Richard Branson. Apparently, he started off with a company trying to sell Christmas trees. He's one of those types that he's purely entrepreneurial. He sees a gap in the market. He sees a problem. Thing of like a nice story that I heard from him was, or about him was, he wanted to take a flight from England to America, and he was like, okay, so I need to pay for a seat in an airplane to get. So then I'm going to waste like, let's say 10,000 rand or something like that. I don't want to waste 10,000 rand. What is the alternative? So he ended up getting it right to lease a plane or rent a plane. Started a marketing campaign to get a lot of people on that plane, and he ended up, the margin was small, but he actually made like, let's just give it a number, $100. He made $100 profit going through all that effort, but he never paid for his ticket.
But you see, that's creativity in solving a problem, because the thing is that there was a problem he was trying to solve, but he just went in about it in a very, very creative way. And that's what I'm saying, that creative people, it's not that their talent isn't needed in the world. It's just that we need to use those things to say, well, use that side of the brain to see things that the left brain people don't see.
Yeah. I think, you'll get the most money for the biggest problem. That's the smaller the problem, the less money you'll have. But for people that don't have an education, it's quite hard, because usually they are limited to things that everyone else can also do. The moment you educate yourself, or you're more niched than the broader population,
correct,
then you are worthwhile, then you're more valuable for someone. Yes. You just need to figure out where the value lies and go in that direction.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about coding now, but if everyone starts coding, then it's like having then that also has no value. So it's all about what gets you excited, so that you can actually commit to that direction.
No, because even in your example, we obviously try to start pushing people to coding, but coding becomes very difficult if it's not going to be your passion. Like, yes, it could get you a job, but a few months into it, you might get depressed that it doesn't feel like you're up for it and stuff like that. So it seems like not that we've misled, but people feel like, okay, fine, I did this to go get a job. And that's actually very true in many fields. I did this to get a job, and now I'm not enjoying it, but I can't go back into poverty or live with my mom, or afford not to have, let's say, all these extra fancy things that I have in life, and I'm stuck with it, which also is a weird thing. So I won't say people put themselves in that situation, but also, as you mentioned, it's about how you apply what you learn. Because for me, obviously, moving into IT industry, it's the principles of maintenance engineering and the solutions around maintenance engineering that I'm doing, but just now on IT system. It's exactly the same thing. We look at the same sort of graphs, we look at the same sort of problems, and root cause analysis. It's just that one is a pump, and then now one is a server, or something else is going wrong. You're setting up the same sort of probes and sensors and stuff like that. And if I was fixed to engineering, I would be stuck in engineering. And that's what sometimes people need to not know how to learn, but realize where can they apply what it is that they know in other fields or different situations. And that is, I think that's where
the real value lies.
Yes.
Someone that can only code but can't apply it to anything else is absolutely useless. I think it's the same with coding. You can compare really well with learning to read. Reading for the sake of reading is absolutely useless. But if you can read to gain that information or to entertain yourself, that's when it gets promising. Whether it entertains you or it actually gives you new knowledge to apply to something else. Same with coding. Coding for the sake of coding is absolutely useless. But the moment you can spot a problem and say, like, listen, this problem can be solved with coding, that's when you get creative. But we're talking about coding, but that's with anything. Like, for example, the other day I thought about the clothing industry. Like, how can you make clothes valuable? Like, I think anyone can learn how to make clothes, but how can you make clothes valuable? And there's a current trend going on that merchandise is a big thing. How can you make a merchandise really valuable? I'm just thinking of something that can be created. Like, if you have a means of having a barcode, like a special code for a certain, so you make a limited edition t-shirts with a certain barcode, and then you can even bring it back to the person that made that code, and then they'll know, like, it was one of those 2,000, and they can repair it, but then you sell it for a premium price, but you give them the insurance that they can bring it back to be fixed. That can be validated with a partner. Obviously, there's some security issues, but if someone can cut it out or something like that. But I was just thinking, like, this is a good concept for someone in the clothing industry, for example, to apply value. So bringing it back to poor people, if you can apply value to something that's absolutely useless, then you can become rich. This is not intentional, but it actually applies quite well to this conversation. When I was in the Cape there, by coincidence, I came in contact with a person, a woman that's from origin from Britain, and she wanted to help the poor community, but she didn't know how. And one day, while she was drinking tea, she thought, like, how can we make tea bags valuable? And it ended up one of the people in the township she employed, and said, like, try to be creative with tea bags. And I'm not sure what the company's name is. I'll look it up. They started making things like this. Look, this is a.
Geez, so they decorate tea bags.
Yeah, so these are all tea bags, and they made and these are people from township, like, they literally go and collect tea bags, and then they paint it, and they get sold in Paris and London, and obviously with a marketing campaign about it, because I think if you just see it, it's nice, but the story behind it is also, so it's that marketing thing that I think that's where the creators, like, this is an entire creative project.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the thing that you have to realize, is that creative people need to realize that, like, things like marketing really add value, because that's what helps people sell these solutions to problems. It's not like, SpaceX and Tesla and stuff like that. Like, it's great that they're solving these problems, but no one's going to buy it if it looks bad, if it's not packaged correctly, if it's not designed, if you don't design the solar panel or the Tesla in the right way. And those are creatives that actually do that, to say, well, let me get the sexy lines in the car. Let me make sure that it's a matte black finish or something like that, because it looks more effective and stuff like that. So creative people do find themselves in there. But I think, going back to what you were talking about, it's still associated to what you're saying. We keep on drifting in and out, which is still fine. You were saying that obviously it's getting some sort of education, getting some sort of knowledge. And one thing that you have mentioned is that, as much as there's importance of degrees and there are alternatives, I think if it is a problem or that you're trying to solve, or value that you're trying to bring, which makes you more valuable, which will earn you more income, there are many resources out there right now. It's obviously, so you have to obviously take your situation into consideration, but there are many resources. Find a problem, I guess, find a way of adding value to something, and then go find the resource out there. I'm not saying you do not need a degree. I'm not going to discourage anyone from getting a degree and stuff like that, but if you want to, you can get. There are businessmen which have started businesses without business degrees, sorry. There are many successful people that I've even met as well, which haven't gone past, let's say, grade 9 or grade 12. And it's not through corruption, but it's literally because they were able to read something. It was either some book, some podcast, something that changed, a discussion with someone else, and they were able to apply that to a certain thing. And as you mentioned, this lady, obviously from the UK and stuff like that, maybe she had a background in marketing and she knows how to do it, and obviously sell it in Paris and France and stuff.
I think with her, it was the case that she had the contacts. And that was the one thing she had. She had contacts, and with that she could help. And I think with people from poor communities, they lack the contacts, they lack the exposure. But what one needs to notice is that with the internet and with all these social media platforms, obviously the competition is greater than ever to make your stuff available. But that's where you need to be creative. Get the person in your community, maybe also without a job, or with, like, who's really creative, and can get that person to work on getting the exposure you need for the product that you want to sell or the service that you want to deliver. I think in the end, to be successful, you can be highly talented, but obviously if you are 5 people with expertise in 5 different fields, and you can combine that, it's far stronger. I could imagine if you are in this poor community surrounded with other poor people, get those people that you see something in them that they can bring to the next level.
And that's the thing that I kept on saying, which I'll obviously discuss. It's the people in the middle class, or I wouldn't say middle class is a big definition, but anyone that's able to basically listen to it, anyone that has maybe who earns a bit of income. It's our responsibility, like that lady did, to say, well, I've got this. I might not have the talent, but how is it that I can connect these people to someone else? Or how is it that I can start something that I can employ people which are of, I guess, which don't have it as good as I am? Because obviously if I am a small business and I'm employing them, that means obviously the fact that they don't have a lot of money. So how can I do that more in order to make sure that they change their situation, and hopefully they can do that for someone else. So let me let you get back to your discussion. But that was actually very exciting.
Yeah, that's actually the conclusion of this paper, where it actually explains what the problem is. I think if people that want to criticize politics, that South Africa is in such a dire situation that if they want to take away from the wealthy will just exit the country. That's another thing that they mentioned in this paper. Like, because there's no international set standard on wealth tax. If South Africa goes very stringent on that, people will just leave South Africa, and that will put South Africa in a poorer situation. So it's usually these populistic rhetoric doesn't help the situation. And yeah, I think like obviously governments can help, and they should help. And obviously corruption doesn't help the process. But if you as an individual or small community want to make a difference, then be aware of the fact that you can actually make that difference if you understand the idea of how money works. I'm not sure whether it's the case. I always imagine that money is a zero-sum game. So if you want to become richer, someone else needs to get poorer. And so if you keep your economy small to your community, that means that if you get richer, someone in your community gets poorer.
Right.
So if you want to enrich your entire community, your idea needs to be bigger than your community. It needs to, and that's why the internet is so valuable. It gives you the opportunity to add value to for people that are willing to pay the extra buck for the value that you give. So if you apply value to someone in a Western country or in a richer country, then you can enrich your community.
Yeah.
And again, I'm like, if it was an assumption that it's zero sum game, I'm not sure. We need to get an economics guy in this discussion.
No, but it would be true, because zero-sum games mean that in someone's gain is also someone else's loss, which is true, because my gain, or let's say if I choose not to invest, or not say invest, and it's something, funny enough, you actually started talking about zero-sum games, because I'm doing a course on game theory, and that was something they mentioned yesterday, and somehow today, you'll hear it later, as I said, I've also spoken about games. But it is a zero-sum game, because obviously if I decide not to spend money, or let's say if I decide not to waste money, it means that another business does not take or doesn't get money. If I choose to buy a MacBook instead of Dell, it means that Mac obviously makes more money and Dell loses out. So definitely it is a zero-sum game, but capitalism is, I guess, at the end of the day, one of those things, especially the world that we work in. The reason why China is doing so well is because they've been able to get their products out to many people around the world, meaning that they are stealing, and obviously that's why a lot of companies, governments, who put import taxes and stuff like that, obviously if you get stuff from China to a certain extent, because they realize, well, that could be money that's going towards a South African or a Dutch person, because they should be buying these products from, let's say, the high price stores. They should be paying the 40 euros, because the 40 euros make sure that this person gets income. But they're buying from China for 5 euros. So they have been able to find a way to get their stuff to other people. And I think that's why a lot of our people, or rich people within South Africa, they make a lot of their wealth from mining activities, diamonds and gold and precious metals and stuff like that, because it is sought after by people, as you've mentioned, in foreign countries and first world countries.
Yeah, I think the important thing for the middle class and upper class is that actually through statistics, there's not quite a lot of them in South Africa, but the people that are in the upper middle and upper class, they they always have the option or they can always decide on what they want to spend their money. What I always like to do, like when I go shopping, I try to see what products were made in South Africa or was contributed to in some way by South Africa. That way, I know that by spending money, that's that some of that money will still circulate in South Africa, and hopefully all of that money circulates in South Africa. That in that way enriching your. That's why the probably South African campaign was started to stimulate the local economy. That all the money that South Africa gets from exporting gold and other minerals and foods and stuff, that they actually help to grow the economy and the money stays here as much as possible. Obviously, it's not possible to let all money stay, and that's rich countries stay rich because they innovate enough to
Keep people spending their money within the country.
exactly. Netflix is a perfect example. Like people were fine with their TVs and SABC and stuff and DSTV, and then Netflix came and they were like, we can make it even easier for you. And now people are like, I'm gonna pay Netflix because it's much easier to watch TV or content.
And I think what you mentioned there, the key word there is being innovative enough, because I think DSTV had such a monopoly and they were just so comfortable because the TV shows were crap. Like they just got too comfortable that they weren't serving anything new. They kept on showing reruns. They kept on showing the old stuff. And the thing is, the only place where I think they're really groundbreaking at the moment, obviously, with Supersport. And that is their lifeline at the moment. If they lose that, if someone else can come into that market, they're basically out of the water. And the thing is, that's why they now try to pass stupid laws to say that, well, you must pay a TV license for any sort of mobile device, because, well, the thing is that you should have been able to. They did have DSTV TV and stuff like that, but they wanted you to buy the full package, the decoder first, before you actually get access to the thing. And the thing is that they lost sight of what they were supposed to do, and they weren't innovative, as you mentioned. And now they've lost out of all those things, and they're trying to recuperate their money, which is never going to work. But as you mentioned, companies are innovative enough to sort of keep the resources within the country, or income within the country.
So that was something I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, another thing I wanted to mention was the fact that if you look, these are statistics that you usually see flying by, that you see this billionaire getting so much richer and then the minimum wage is steady. That's something that you usually get. And if that is how capitalism works, if that's how the economy is, and if you need government to intervene every time for that, how can you be like that rich person? I thought, so I was thinking today, okay, if you want to be like a rich person, then you need to act like a rich person. Now, what do rich people do? If they get money, they rather than spending it, they invest it again so that it actually grows for them.
I swear you read my presentation or something like that, because that's also another point I have on it. But anyway.
So, because apparently, like if you look at statistics, that for market growth usually is slightly higher than the growth of wages. So what you'll get is over time, it might seem simple, like 1%, 2%, but compound interest. People that don't know compound interest, Google compound interest. It really is significant. If you have compound interest over time, it can actually, it makes a significant difference, and that's why rich people stay rich or become richer, and that's how inequality widens, because obviously the rich people have enough money to save away. But let's say you're in a poor situation. How you need to ask yourself the question: how can I adjust my lifestyle? And that's where it becomes hard for the poorest of the poor, because they can't. But then we already explained ways of them hopefully solving that. But let's say you have like a little money on the side, like for example 100 rand. Now I know for some people 100 rand is a lot, For most in South Africa, 100 Rand is a lot. But if you can get it right to save 100 Rand every single month into an investment, I think if you're really poor, I would go for high risk. And then you'll see over the years that compound interest will make a significant difference. And there's another thing that popped up while I was talking about this was a lot of people that went to university, you hear that their parents, when they were born, they had a set money invested for them. Now, by the time they went to university, there's 20 years that passed. Now, with that compound interest, it might have been a small amount that or not too significant amount that they had to put in, but through time, through that compound interest, that small amount paid for that child's degree. So if your parents are worried about your child's future, I think that's another thing you can consider if you are patient. I think a lot of these things, like money, asks patience.
Yeah. No, I think it's as you mentioned, the compound interest is a big thing, and that's what made Warren Buffett so successful. It's not really about timing the market. He always looked for things which were solid, but also I think a majority of his wealth came from the time he was 65, over 65. He was still a millionaire and stuff like that, but he really got into the billion stratosphere when he was 65. And I think, yes, you do hear of one-hit wonders, and people like Zuckerberg who under the age of 30 made billions and stuff like that. But those are the outliers, a small percentage. And I think obviously it's not to say that people mustn't dream of being that, but at the same time, people feel like if I can't get $1 billion idea or $1 million Rand idea or something like that, I'm gonna do nothing. And that's the thing. And eventually you have to wake up to realize that, oh, I need to do something earlier than I need to do it later, because of, as you said, time and compound. Like you can never win time again. Like money, you can always win back. You can lose it, obviously, and somehow get it back again by changing your thinking or finding a new idea and doing something different. But when it comes to time, if you've had money in, let's say, an investment account and stuff like that, like it just does something that you cannot manipulate. And even if you had to say, fine, I made a lot of money now I put it in the investment market. Well, the first question is to say, well, the amount of time that you didn't put it in investment and stuff like that, you could have made X.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you could make now by putting it into an investment account, you could have made a lot more because of time.
Yeah. For all those people that buy lotto tickets, put that money in an investment account. You'll be surprised how much money you'll have after 20 years.
Yeah. No, I think there's even an app in South Africa called Stash or something like that, where like they ask you to do something like put 5 Rand in a day or 5 Rand every 2 weeks and stuff. Just like there's literally small amounts of money that you can put aside. So as you say, if someone's craving to buy a lotto ticket, put it into Stash, and I think Stash puts it in some sort of investment account. I think there's another one in America called Acorns, which takes rounds off your purchases or something like that and puts it to an investment account. And you can choose obviously low risk, moderate risk, high risk, and stuff like that. But you definitely need to get into the investment stratosphere. And yeah, I'll wait for my part. Let me let you continue because I'm just really excited. I'm just like,
that's definitely what you mentioned about that small amounts. I think I read something about an actuarial influencer. I'm not sure what's his name, but he wanted to show how compound interest works and how significant that is. So he said, for every day, on day 1 of the year, you add 1 Rand, and then on day 2, 2 Rand, and 3 Rand, and then in the 365 Rand. And I think that was his second year. In his first year, he was just like 1 Rand, 1 Rand, 1 Rand. Like, no. He started off with cents. So day 1, 1 cent. So just to show everyone, well, to make it as low, like, well, if someone thinks like, I need to contribute 365 Rand on my last day, that's going to be quite tough. So he thought, okay, that's all with cents. The next year, the following year, he was like, cool. Now we're going to do Rand. So, and he did that. And obviously you can calculate it. I'm not sure what the amount is, but it's quite significant. People are shocked if they see like these small amounts that you put away, but a significant difference that makes. And we're only talking about the value that you actually put in. We're not even talking about the margins you get if you invest like 5% per year growth. That actually, if you do these small things and the market actually gives you that extra value, that will really help you in the long run. I think with most people that are in dire situations, they don't have time, or they don't want to make time. And I see it with a lot of people. That's actually the word, that people that are at the age of 60, 65 years old, and now they see that they have a money problem. And like if you're 20 years old, like you can solve that money problem. I can give you a plan that by 65 years old you'll have a good life. But if you are 60, 65 years old, I'm not sure what you can do to, because obviously you're old, you can't really compete in the market to someone that's young and educated. Because if it's young and uneducated, then they'll rather take the experienced person, and then you can compete. But if you need to compete to the young and educated, they are usually also cheaper than the old and experienced. Then it becomes rough. I'm not sure how what answers I can give to those people.
I think here and then it's a difficult one, because I think, yeah, what can you do if you are, in a position where I guess you are poor right now, and then you're also old as well. Like, I don't have a solution for that one. I guess the onus will be on, I guess, hopefully the relatives of that person. And as I said, they still, the solutions, that some of the things that we're mentioning are great for a person in terms of, let's say, if they're poor, but at least they have a plan that once they change the situation, at least, or it starts to improve, they can start to apply these things. But I still think that there's that huge middle layer of between the poor and obviously the wealthy, which have a little bit of income, and they don't do anything with it, because it's, as you said, it's the whole flywheel. Because if they start to make better decisions and start investing and stuff like that, they can not only employ people, but they can start buying assets and start investing in those type of things, and then they can make sure their kids go to university, so it makes sure that there will be less. So it's sort of, it eats away at it slowly, very similar to the compound interest thing that we mentioned now for a person. But like, if more people within that whole gap between super rich and super poor start doing this as well, it will compound to a state where at least, okay, fine, lives are improving for a certain percentage, and there will always be people which just get placed into the poverty, bracket, just because of life, and that can be unfair. But the thing is that at least there are people which are in the motion of trying to change lives for them, that it sort of reduces it. I don't know, how much more do you have to say, because I also wanted to throw in some points, because I feel that we are definitely aligned with a lot of our thinking as well.
Yeah, I think I've definitely said everything I wanted to say. I think for those who have the question on, well, how do I invest, how do I do this and that we currently talk about, I just googled something, and there's so much information. Like, if there's one topic that there's a lot of information on, it's investing.
Yeah.
So if it's on YouTube or just Google itself, like that's one thing you don't have to worry about on getting information. There's more than enough. I think it's the problem is that there's so much information, you need to actually filter out what's good and what's not. But I think the more you read, you just need to read a lot. Then you'll see that they will form certain trends like diversification and those type of things. But if you see that's the whole thing, like you need just read a lot, and you'll see what's truth and what's bogus.
The one that I like, I think, if people are thinking, oh, what's the first place to start? I think there's a guy on YouTube called Dave Ramsey, and he's got something called 7 Baby Steps. And his background was, he was in real estate. He lost a lot of money. He basically went bankrupt. And I think at the age of 35, with the family and kids and stuff like that, like, he had a negative net worth. And he figured out that, okay, fine, I need to change this. And he is worth something like $15 million right now. Obviously, he became popular, or he generated a lot of money because he started giving people the same personal finance advice and stuff like that. But it worked for him. And one of the biggest things that he said was, obviously, he cut out spending. Like anything, he basically downsized or downgraded his living expenses to try pay off the debt because he was in millions of dollars of debt. And that's the thing, because he keeps on saying that the more debt I have, it's more money that I'm giving to someone else. Every time I go to work and I've got debt, I must know that that salary is not going towards me. It's actually going towards the people that I owe money to. And that was the biggest thing for him, is to clear off his debt. And after he cleared off his debt, I think the next thing is he says you put sort of some money in savings, and then you have to get like 3 or 4 months worth of savings, like just in the background. And then you look at stuff like making sure that you have a retirement annuity, as you mentioned, looking after the time that you're going to be 65. And then he's got 7 steps to say that you have to clear this first phase one, get rid of all your bad debts. Like, there's no point in investing, there's no point in saving if you've got debt at the end of the day. And that's something
your best investment is paying off the debt.
Yes. And that's something I'm going to chat about now. So let me start in the beginning. I think you spoke about obviously a lot of stats and stuff like that where it's very difficult to get it, and I do understand. But there was one video, I think there's a channel that I listen to a lot, it's called Economics Explained, and they actually spoke about the economy of South Africa, and they call it the economy of South Africa the most unequal nation in the world. And we are, statistically speaking, the most unequal nation when it comes to how wealth is spread amongst our people in the world. We are the highest.
So that's partially true. There's actually 2 countries that are actually more unequal than us, but they are small economies, Namibia and Seychelles. And all the other countries that are more unequal don't want to participate in this. So it's for countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. They also have. Yeah, but just to keep it simple, South Africa is the most unequal.
Yeah, so they mentioned something called an income Gini coefficient, which is the measure of deviation of distribution of income amongst individuals or households within a country. So it's a coefficient, it's a ratio, it's a percentage. So you can either use it as 0 and 1. So 1 will be 100%, 0 or 0, or you can just use it as a ratio of 0 and 0.5 and 1. If we have a Gini coefficient of 0, that means that there's perfect equality, meaning that the wealth of the nation is spread amongst everyone else. If you have
to make it very simple, the poorest person has the same income as the richest person.
Correct.
That is, that's it.
So that's perfect equality. And then 1 would be obviously a person that owns everything. 1 person owning everything, meaning that all the wealth goes basically to 1 individual. And that's basically the income Gini coefficient. So other countries, Finland is 0.26. The USA, which I thought would be like, we've spoken about a lot of giants that are super rich, but obviously there are a lot of giants that are super rich, so there's a lot of distribution of wealth. And the USA is 0.39. China, 0.47, starting moving towards, I guess, more communism and stuff like that, 0.47. And then somehow we land higher than China, 0.63. So there are many positive things about South Africa, but basically most of the benefits go to a few individuals. A lot of the money that's generated, everything that's great about South Africa, the tourism, the weather, the resources and stuff like that goes to a few resources. And one point that you mentioned earlier was obviously the fact that you need to emulate what the rich people do. And I think there was one quote that I found there to say that there's no point in studying poverty if you aim to solve it. Like, you can study poverty and it's just going to tell you about more poverty. But we obviously trying to discuss how you can move from that, obviously, point of poverty to place of wealth. And I think that's maybe something that I feel governments waste a lot of time. They keep on discussing how poor people are and how bad it is, but they never really any solutions about it. And I guess it's not their place to do it. And they can interfere, they can obviously help, but whatever it is.
I think it's also a case that it's so complex. And politics is easy rhetoric that you need to convey. It's you can't give complex answers to the public. You won't get any votes for a complex answer.
Exactly. No, that's true. In saying that, so our economic system is a capitalist system in South Africa, right? Those are the rules of the game that the rich people use to make money, and those are the rules of the game that are applied to us. And obviously, it's how you play this game that you either become rich or you become poor, right? So if it's built on capitalism, then you need to understand the rules of the game. And therefore, you need to have to figure out how to win in the system of capitalism, right? And at the end of the day, I said generating wealth within South Africa is a game. And basically, my goal today is to try simplify this game to the best of my ability, to the point that, people which have different resources, at least, they can have a way of saying, well, this is the game. How I choose to play the game will depend on a lot of things. My background, my education, where I'm located, who my relatives are, the contacts that I have and stuff, like people you mentioned, stuff like that. But these are the rules of the game, right? And what the income Gini coefficient has basically told us is that the wealth in South Africa is shared amongst a small group of people. And it's in their interest as well to keep winning at this capitalistic game. So at no point in time are they going to give up their advantage. So the only thing is that you have to sort of beat them at their game. And I think there are ways to beat them at their game by emulating the things that they do as well. Right. So, people might think about this to say, well, you know what, maybe I'm not in the game, I'm not too interested. But if you spend a single cent in South Africa, if you're earning a single cent in South Africa, you're part of the game. Like, there's no way of escaping it. You're part of South Africa, you spend your money, you receive money in South Africa, you're part of this game. And it's in your best interest as well to obviously do the best that you can, obviously, to win this game, right? So
you say you're part of the game. I actually thought about this today. I was like thinking about money and everything. And then I thought about the people that don't need to worry about are the Khoisan. Like those communities that tribal communities that like they don't I assume that they don't work with money, or at least not a lot of, like they usually sustain themselves without money.
Correct.
So they're not really part of this game, so they don't need to
listen to this. No, but I think it's whatever is traded in order to, whatever is traded for value at the end of the day. But most commonly around South Africa, it's going to be money. I think 99%.
It was just an entering thought that like the moment you have money, you're part of the game.
Yeah, unless you're a Khoisan. No, that's true. So if we want equal distribution of wealth in South Africa, there need to be more people which are winning this game and on an individual basis. And I think that's where you need to begin. So the wealth game, right? And what I've tried to do is try to compare the game of wealth to football, because it's a game that's played and understood by the majority of people. I feel that poor people will understand football, rich people understand football, middle-class people will understand football. And not to go into the full depths of football or stuff like that, just a few elements of it which are really important. So number one is the scoreboard, right? Many games, as well as football, in our example specifically, the scoreboard indicates how well you are doing, right? If your opponent has more goals than you, it's a bad thing. If you have more goals than your opponent, it's a good thing. You can also be at a draw, which means that you aren't losing and you aren't winning, right? And some people would love to win 10-0. Some people wouldn't mind a draw. Some people obviously are happy with a 1-0 victory because at least they are winning. Your reaction to the scoreboard will determine what it is that you need to do. So in a game of soccer, if I'm losing 1-0, it means that I need to change tactics or strategies and do something else, right? If I'm winning 10-0, I might need to relax, or I decide, okay, let's go for the kill and let's smash them. Let's push for 11-0. And if it's a draw, I can be happy with it. I can try to keep a draw and stuff like that. And I think a lot of people are maybe in the sense of saying, okay, I'm either at a draw, I'm at a minor loss. And well, the thing is, because they don't even know that there's a scoreboard, and that's the other part about it, which is quite important. So they actually need to know what the score is at the end of the day. The scoreboard is the most important thing because it will affect the decisions that you make and how you can obviously move in the direction that it is that you want to move, right? And the scoreboard in this wealth game, I guess, is your net worth. Well, I've come to it to say your net worth, meaning that do I owe someone money? Am I in the green or am I in the red at the end of the day? Do I have more money that I can access compared to that if I have to liquidate this and have to give it to someone else? Like, what is my situation at the end of the day? A net worth of 0 is basically the same as a draw in football, right? It means that you at a neutral place. You can either be happy with it, but you shouldn't be too sad about it. But obviously, it should be our goal, and it's in our best interest to obviously push this number on the scoreboard to say, well, I want to be in the advantageous position, right? Equal distribution does not mean that everyone gets the same score, as you had mentioned, obviously having a Gini coefficient of 0. No, it doesn't mean that everyone has a scoreboard of 0, but at least everyone is in a favorable position. If we want to distribute the wealth in the country, everyone needs to be in a favorable position that suits them. If there are some people which are maybe happy with a little bit of debt and stuff like that, then like that's great, but it's still in our best interest to obviously push forward. As you mentioned, when it gets to a point where everything is good enough, then we need to start looking to say, well, how do we all push our scoreboards against other countries? Because we need to start taking in their income by innovating, by doing something different, that we can start saying, well, yeah, you pay us money for something that we make.
Yeah. You mentioned now that it's to get the equal score is not necessary. It's just that everyone is in a favorable enough position,
Right.
and I totally agree with that. And for me, that definition is if you have the resources available. Resources generally means money, but it can also be accessibility, etc. To do whatever you would like to do or to achieve anything, you have the ability to achieve it. The only thing that should stop you is your own effort.
Right. Yeah.
So that's how I see well. So
Yeah.
whether you're in the Northern Cape where you don't need a lot of things to like it's much cheaper to stay there than, for example, in the Western Cape or in Gauteng.
Right.
Wealth for me is that you're above that threshold where you need to worry about money or anything. You only need to worry about your own effort.
Yeah.
It's the only thing you need to worry about.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not about anyone else, it's your own scoreboard. Your own scoreboard and how you determine it. As I mentioned, obviously, for some people, yes, they can get competitive about it. They want to compare themselves with someone else. And, you are welcome to do that. How you react to the score is obviously up to you. If it's a normal draw, if it's going to be 1-0 victory, like that's great. So that's the importance of the scoreboard in terms of the World Game. And in terms of people, I guess, keeping score, I think the best ways are to do that, which is because it's really important. Obviously, I'll explain the other parts of the game, but it's really important. So obviously, people can keep a budget. There's an app that I have used before, and I started using it again actually in preparation for today. 22/7 by Old Mutual, where you basically put in all your details, wherever it is that you invest in, your bank accounts and stuff like that, and it basically calculates your net worth to say that this is how much income you earn, and it also has a budget tool on there. It also says that these are recurring expenses. Like you spend so much on food and stuff like that. It really tells you where exactly your money is going. And your goal at the end of the day is to say, okay, fine, I want my scoreboard to be green. I want my net worth to be positive or zero or whatever it is that you need to be. But life is worse off for you if it's red at the end of the day. And that's the significance of a scoreboard, right? It's going to determine what action that you take if you are happy with your status or you want to improve it, right? Okay. Other point about football and the game of money is that there are rules. So like many games, there are certain things that should be done and things that cannot be done in order to win the game, right? You basically should not cheat. If you cheat and you get caught, you'll be penalized. And that is the duty of government, policies, rules, regulatory boards, and others. Basically, they ensure that that cheating does not take place. It doesn't mean that it does not happen, but there are penalties for that, and that can take you into your territories where you're obviously in a negative net worth, and that's something to avoid.
I agree with that. Government should be the referee, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if there are rules applied and people start complaining and say that's going to benefit the rich or that's going to be to the detriment of the poor, if those are the rules, then adjust your strategy so that you're still part of the winning game. This was actually a big discussion during the Trump Biden campaign, and people were like, "Yeah, but Trump is good for the American economy, and that's why people need to vote for Trump." And then there's one person mentioned that like government they're only applying the rules.
Mm-hmm.
How you then make money with that rule? Yeah, how that benefits you. That's your own responsibility. And that can just as easily be applied in any other country. And make sure that you're on top of it. Educate yourself on what these rules are, so that you're on the winning side. Rich people employ other people. Make sure that they know the rules well enough, so that they can stay rich.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, it's obviously in your best interest, obviously, to abide by the rules. And I'm not motivating people to go against the rules, but if you get caught, basically there are penalties, because that's the thing. You are in this game, as soon as you realize that it's a game that everyone's playing, you cannot cheat at any point in time, right? And I like what you said previously, is that the rules apply to everyone. Yes, some people obviously play underhand, but the time that they get caught, they'll be penalized for it. Some people do not like maybe certain strategies that people use, but you did use the word strategy. And if the rules are the same to everyone, if the rules apply to everyone else, the biggest point, and this is the part where I will speak the most about, is the strategies, right? Like the game of soccer, right? You will have strategies with how you will move the indicator on that scoreboard, right? And in this field, as you had mentioned, there's a lot of resources and stuff like that. And I just want to say I'm not an expert in any single one strategy. Strategies are what will be actually used if you are not happy with the score at the end of the day. And a manager or coach basically will tailor a strategy to either the opponent is facing or many other things. But they basically set up strategies for various factors, which is like your team strengths and weaknesses. And that's you as an individual. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How do I move this indicator? What can I do? And I need to tailor my strategy for that. If you have education, if you don't have education, maybe it might mean you need to go get an education in order for you to move the scoreboard. But it's going to depend on you. Some people have context, as you mentioned. There's a book which I have written down here at the bottom because I want to put this in the discussion notes. A book called Your Unfair Advantage. And I think they've sort of categorized, everyone has some sort of advantage, and there are five of them. It can be your, I think it's education, your location. So some people might think, you can't go sell, what do you call it, ice cream, or you can sell ice cream in the desert, but you can't go sell, igloos in the desert at the end of the day. It's just not a profitable business at the end of the day. So you need to also sometimes look at your location and say, what is it there? And basically adapt your strategy. You will adapt your football manager will adapt your strategy to who they can afford to buy in the current season, and basically budgets that are allocated to them. They've got a bigger budget, they can buy bigger name players, bigger sort of assets and stuff like that. And the strategies basically determine what it is that a manager does in order to move the scoreboard. He's in the position that he wants to have it at the end of the day, right? There's a certain indicator. So at the end of the day, the coach has to look at what he's got and decide what tactics he will use to improve the scoreboard. And that's where we go into sort of saying, well, what is it that people can do to start really improving this scorecard at the end of the day? I think the real challenge around it is that it can get complex. But for me, per se, and what has worked for me is a very basic strategy, which is one, to cut out frivolous spending, basically. Cut out my expenses, which do not need to be made. And funny enough, if you look at I think I looked at the top 4 richest people in South Africa, right? And they make their money within this sector of where people will basically spend this extra income.
Retail.
Yes. So we've got number 1, which is Oppenheimer, which is diamond mining. Fine. Yes, they are external. They are external people which obviously buy diamonds, but obviously within South Africa, there's a huge thing about the bigger the ring, the better and stuff like that. And I'm sure obviously he's putting money into marketing campaigns because he's like, there's disposable income out there from the middle class. I want it. So number 1 is Oppenheimer, but obviously he's also done well to find value or add value to a product which is sought after by people in other countries, right? As we mentioned, that's the thing that we need to do. Number 2 is Johann Rupert and family. They are in the luxury goods businesses. So they're $4.6 billion American dollars. So they're also in luxury goods. I do not know what specifically it is, but the thing is, I do know definitely that so many, I'm not saying people shouldn't drive cars and drive fancy cars, drive the cars of your dreams and stuff like that. But a lot of people which become successful, let's say starting to move to the upper middle class and stuff like that, some of the purchases that they make, when they want to flaunt their success, they go buy themselves a Mustang, a Bugatti, for the top range cars. And the thing is that that's all good for, let's say, the dealership, but the big money makers basically will be the people in Germany. They have created something which they say, well, even if we make it in Germany, there are going to be people in South Africa which are going to be using all their disposable income every single month, paying 10,000 plus rand a month, just to show off the fact that, well, I've made it. I think Ghost Becker, he's in media and entertainment. He's with Naspers and stuff like that. He's also at 2.5.
Yeah, DSTV is a part of him, I think.
You see, correct there. So there's another thing that I'm not saying people don't need it, but hey, you can set up an interconnection with that amount of money and rather decide to learn how to program or learn digital marketing on HubSpot for free or something like that. But anyway, he's created a product which says, hey, if you get bored, pay this monthly, fee, and you'll have sport and entertainment, and you can relax on your couch. They've made it very attractive for people basically to spend a lot of money. And then I think Raymond Ackerman, which is basically in retail, biggest one, obviously. If you look at where Big and Play, exactly. So even then, retail is a huge place where people spend a lot of money, and you see that in South Africa a lot. Come hell or high water, people make sure that in December they buy themselves clothes, to show off in Christmas time, not really to show off. Yes, there are people who need clothes. Yes, I definitely think there are needs, but yeah. So this thing is really, that's work for me, is basically to cut out frivolous spending, right? Spending that does not contribute to spending money on something that's not gonna bring money back to me.
Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah.
I think people, especially in South Africa, the case where people want to live above their means.
Mm-hmm.
I think that needs to end. People live a life that is on par on their means.
On your scorecard.
People, exactly. Like if you save 1%, 2%, 3% on the expenses now, you can live this lifestyle over a few years. Don't measure yourself with the other people, because the other people are also living on debt. Yeah, that's the most important thing. Like if you drive a luxury car, why? A car is there to get you from point A to point B.
Yeah.
Now I'm talking actually now more to the middle class, because the lower class can't afford a car. But even the lower class, why buy the fanciest clothes? It's like save that up so that you can later on have a better lifestyle. If you can live your lifestyle for maybe 2 to 3 years on a lower level, you're definitely and you apply those other things that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to help you in the long run.
Oh, definitely. And that's why I said this is probably the most basic strategy, and it's very similar to, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and these are time and tested, methods of people changing their lifestyles or changing their situations and circumstances. It's cutting extra expenses, obviously, and obviously somehow trying to find a way to generate more income, right? And what I noted here is that I know a lot of people will not like that one, and I'm speaking specifically to the middle class because, as I said, this message is definitely surrounding the middle class because, as we said here, poor people, there's no expenses that they can cut at the end of the day, and there's no way that they have a choice of generating income. But I'll show you how the middle class can actually obviously use some of these things.
Before you mention the middle class, I know a lot of stories about the lower class that go into debt to buy things.
Yes.
Please never go into debt.
Yeah.
Do not do that. It's expensive. Don't do it. Yeah.
And obviously, it's like stuff like bad debt, as you say. Like if you look at an income statement, like so a good debt would be like something like a house, because at least the money that you are spending obviously is going to be it's growing in the positive direction, meaning that you get value for it and stuff like that. So they are good debts.
But don't buy clothes on debt.
Yes.
Don't buy food on debt.
Yes. Buy anything on loan. Just because it's a good deal, and the person that says it, well, you only have to pay 30 days late or something like that. I think the other biggest one, which for me was a big trap, especially because I got used to it, was buying cell phones on contract. That is the worst. That is one of the big money killers or money makers in South Africa for MTN. And it's great, obviously, to employ so many people, but people don't need to buy the latest iPhone unless you're able to do it cash. And that was a big game changer for me. I remember I bought one in Romania, iPhone 11 in Romania, because it was 15,000 Rand compared to 28,000 Rand in South Africa. And that's the reason I got it. But after that, I said I will never sign up for a contract, because I still had a contract phone at the time, but for photos and stuff like that. I still had a contract phone at the time. And to try get them to stop deducting or to cancel your contract is a mission. They want to offer you this, they want to offer you that, can not just give you the SIM card only or something like that, because they realize, well, the more people I have on the contract, it's basically more for me to push my scorecard into the green, whoever owns a company and stuff like that. And obviously, he's providing a service and people need it. Some people need it, but no, I'm on prepaid now, and I'm very happy. And I said I will never buy a phone on contract ever again. And the thing is that I had a habit, because I really do like phones, and I've always liked phones and technology and stuff like that. I have a habit of going to MTN's website every month, the first of the month, and I used to download the Yellow Trader just to see what exactly it is that they charge for phones. And I think it was especially just before lockdown started, so that's March 2020. I started to see that they start to make contracts or set out contracts for 36 months now. And it wasn't on everything, it became the norm now, sort of to prime you to get used to being to that contracts are now over 36 months. And I look at the prices, I'm like, since when are there 36-month contracts? I'm like, oh, that's stupid. Like, no one's going to sign up for 36-month contracts if they're 24-month contracts. Yes, it's at a lower rate, but no one wants to pay something for 3 years. And now if you go on the Yellow Trader, almost every single contract, you cannot get a contract for unless for 36 months. What they've done is basically they've secured themselves money for 3 years. And then they'll try to give you
psychology.
Yeah.
It's also psychology. People think, okay, paying 100 Rand a month isn't that so much, but paying 5,000 Rand for a phone is insane.
But what's the cost over time?
Prices,
Yeah,
these prices that obviously don't add up. I'm not like you're the expert when it comes to MTN prices.
No, it's just because I've always used MTN. It's not like I am against them or something like that. But I'm just in a situation where like, I'm playing the game for myself here. So like it's great what you guys are doing for someone else and not that it's great if someone else isn't aware of it, but I am not going to be part of your plan to make you guys rich. And the thing is that's the thing. They'll be like, but don't you need this one? Or you always need the second phone. I'm like, no, I keep on telling people, I'm like, I'm financially wiser now. The reason I was with you guys, like, oh, you've been with us since, I think I had a cell phone contract from the time I was 14. Like, oh, you've been with us for more than 10 years and stuff like that. I was like, yeah, because I was stupid back then. And the lady was like, what do you mean?
You've been 3-0 behind all these years. And now you're catching up.
Yeah, no. Well, the thing, it was just... No, for me, it was just we were in that position where, like, it was a thing. It was nice to have a new cell phone and stuff like that, but for us, it was really a reward my dad used to give us to say, well, if you do well at school, like, you get a cell phone, at the end of, so you can get your upgrade and stuff like that. It used to be every 1 year, and then it was every 2 years, and then now it's every 36 months. Now they're trying to do that, but obviously they're playing the game, as you said. They're doing whatever it is. They're employing strategies to somehow get their scorecard in the green, or they want to win 10 mil basically. Now they're pushing for 11 mil by moving on to 36-month contracts.
But you see, with all these companies, subscription-based companies, Netflix, you pay per month, everything becomes subscription-based.
Yeah.
Pay this amount per month, and if you don't feel like a lot, but before you know it, it's your whole salary.
Yeah. And so, as I said, the strategy, the most basic strategy at the end of the day, the one that is true and tested, at least it will get you in the green. In terms of how well it'll push you in the green, that's obviously a different story. But as I said, you cut your frivolous spending, and obviously you generate more income, right? And many people don't like point number one, which is cutting frivolous spending, because it requires discipline. But the harsh truth is that there's no other way. You can only increase your spending when you generate more income at the end of the day. That's the only time that you can say, well, fine, now I want to go on holiday, I want to buy a laptop, stuff like that. Only when you have generated more income and you basically clear your debts do you deserve, or should you be allowed to actually spend money. And that's why the super rich can go on holiday. They found basically, or eat at fancy restaurants and drive fancy cars. Yes, they can spend 2 million Rand on a car, but the thing is that they're earning 14 million Rand on the side. It's for them, that's that difference. They're still going to be in the green, 12 million, whereas you're going to be in the red, 2 million. There's levels to this, right? And the thing is, as I said, that with our top four richest people in South Africa, they make their money from middle-class citizens basically saying, hey, you know what? I've got this extra money. The marketing campaign looks good. Let me part with my cash to show my friends that I have done well. And here's some money so that you can make me look good. And they probably be like, oh, thank you very much. You and 4 other friends of yours did that. And then now I can also go buy my own one at cost price, or at whatever you call it. And you don't know those conversations, because that's what I'm saying. When you play the game of football, you're not going to go tell your opponent to say, hey, this is my strategy. This is what we're going to do. Okay, this is what I'm also going to do. They've got their strategies in order to try extract cash from you. You can obviously put something up in place to say, well, I'm going to defend that by not giving them that money at the end of the day. I'm going to keep my scorecard green at the end of the day. Right. Generating income is difficult as well, because it comes with a few challenges, and it's also hard, as you mentioned, to think small. When you say I need to generate more income, people always think, okay, fine, how can I immediately replace my job? Like, whoa. Like, try and make an extra $500 a month first. And in the research of this, I actually want to go back and watch this guy's video. Some guy was saying it's about a game. It's about doubling your income, or doubling something. It's a game of doubles, getting rich. To say that, okay, fine. If I put in, $10, can I get $20? If I put in $20, how can I get $40? If I get $40, how can I put in $80? And you are 10 doubles away from becoming a millionaire. You double your money 10 times. I think you start with $1. You double it 10 times, you get into the millions category. And the annoying thing, as you said, there are small things like time and kind of stuff and those type of things. But someone who is, let's say, poor or on the lower scale, if you are not employed and you can somehow get yourself, let's say, $100 or something. I've seen a story of some ladies who started a chili farm where there were 3 ladies, they put $100 together and they own their own chili farm. They make sauces, they make jams. I don't know how you make chili jam, but yeah, there's some way that you do it. They make jams and they started with $300. These 3 ladies put their money together. They decided, okay, fine, we're going to buy the seeds. We're going to put the thing inside. They try grow them, and they did a small scale up until the point where, like, okay, we're selling a lot from our little household. Now let's put it into a bigger place and a bigger place and a bigger place. But basically, they put the concept to say that with my $300, is there a way that I can double it? And the nice thing about something like produce and farming and stuff like that, not that it's not, it's hard or difficult, or it's not hard or difficult. You know, some people feel like, okay, where do I get the land from? Like, you will get the land when you get to a point where you need land. Like, if you don't have land in the beginning, you want to get given a big piece of land or something like that, and you think that, okay, fine, now that I've got the land, I'm going to be rich. Like, you just made it very difficult to double 100,000 rand investment. You need to figure out how you can double the 100 rand or 2,000 or 5,000 rand investment first, and say, how can I double that, let's say, in some sort of small business, and then try to do that on scale to say, well, if I can, let's say, okay, fine, go back to the story of these ladies, fine, they put in $300, they try to figure out a way of doubling it to say, how can I make 600 rand? And now that they've got 600 rand, you know, they have to obviously double to the next level and stuff like that. But then they also face the 600 rand problems. And then they're like, well, if I can do a 600 rand batch, 600 rand batch, 600 rand batch, I just have to do it multiple times or at scale. And all of a sudden, it means a lot of things. It means a lot of income. 600 rand times how many little micro farms that I have or something like that. And there are also a lot of people that I've seen in America which do these micro farms. They've got a house at home. They've got spare space in their backyard, a little garage or something like that. They grow microgreens and they sell those to say, well, it's an extra 1,000, it's extra 2,000. And then when that does well, they're like, well, I've got money to try, say, let me make an extra, let me double that. And it's very hard to think small. Like, even myself, like, obviously, in terms of time and stuff like that, I feel sometimes it's difficult. As I said, my strategy is very basic. And that's also because I'm not much of a risk taker. But my strategy is very basic. Cut out extra expenses. Basically, whatever's left, put that into investments and savings and fixed deposit accounts and all these kind of things. I've got a financial advisor that helps me with that. And that should be helping me on my way until I get to a point to say, well, I feel like this is a problem I'm trying to solve or a business I can start. Let me go do that. And the key will be for me to start small as well, right? I think this is where many South Africans will struggle. And I think this is where I would like government to help out a lot more. But I also do know that, you know, it's it's hoping for a lot of things.
Yeah. What helped me actually, I'm also doing the cutting expenses thing. What makes it easier is to gamify it. If anything is hard, try to make a game out of it.
Yeah. And that's what I wish we had this discussion earlier in life, because it's through this research that I thought about it. And I realized, okay, fine, I'm in a decent enough position, but it's not because it is maybe by luck and obviously by the fact that I'm in a good job and stuff like that. But definitely now that it is, you know, like after this discussion, and I've obviously after writing this research and looking at many things, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to gamify it. You know, that's what I said. I've downloaded that 22/7 app and I've put in all my accounts and stuff like that. And it tells me my net worth is positive. And I'm like, great. And you know, you can actually, there's a chart which says that you can track your stuff like that. So now I'm like, okay, now I'm like, okay, fine. How do I actually push this thing? And in pushing that or finding ways to somehow push that thing, it will lead to things like, okay, fine, means that I should invest more, because any investment will show up as a positive net worth. The thing is that some people think their net worth is only their disposable income. No, it's every single asset that you have. Your retirement annuity, your provident funds, your, you know, insurance and stuff like that. Those are part of your net worth at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It means that if anything has to happen, you will have access to it. Maybe not instantly, but you'll have access to that cash, and it will help you out in a situation where it is a problem. So I think that there's a huge percentage of South Africans, obviously more of us in the middle part, which can get in this game or get into the money game and help in terms of improving the poverty situation in South Africa by cutting their spending. You know, this opens up the door for people to have some sort of disposable income, which can be used to generate extra income through small businesses and investing, as we mentioned, right? Most South Africans, unfortunately, generate income through employment, right? And the change stops here, because what happens is that you get employed, you get an income, and whatever is left after that, if there is anything left, you spend it, as you had mentioned as well, in terms of what can you do to buy the little laptop, which helps you obviously start coding, which can hopefully help you generate some sort of income in the future, right? So if the middle class men and women within South Africa, which is probably the majority of people which can listen to this, start to cut spending in the luxury sectors, they will be left with a lot of money that can be used to buy assets and start small businesses which can employ locals. So if I'm starting a small business, I can't afford to hire a university graduate, which is a good thing for the person which, let's say, is in a poor situation. Meaning that, okay, fine, maybe my small businesses, I make cakes on the side, right? And by me baking these cakes and stuff, I need maybe a little assistant, someone that's basically going to, mix the batter and take in orders, or maybe take the phone calls and stuff like that. And by doing that, at least now someone else starts to generate income. And what they need to do, obviously, is to say, okay, fine, with this small income that I'm generating, let me make sure that I don't have any debts. Let me make sure that I have something saved up in there. And what happens is that as they keep on building that up and they start making smarter decisions, the goal is that this now assistant says, okay, I've got enough money to go start my own little bakery. And they're going to employ someone else. Obviously, the original owner will need to go buy another assistant or get another assistant. Gets another assistant. Another assistant hopefully has the same sort of concept. And as you say, it's a flywheel.
Yeah. What actually is nice about that is that you also bring in that with that indirect education. Okay, baking is maybe not the best example, but if you have a company which requires a minimum level of education, skills or expertise, you can actually, if it requires a week of education or through experience that you gain, it actually then you actually leverage someone to the next category. Yes. They're not uneducated; they are semi-skilled.
Correct, and that's why I'm saying that it's going to be the people in the middle class which are going to basically be able to drive that, because obviously someone who's in big business is going to be far removed from, I guess, the divide gets bigger. Yes, it is your interest, obviously, in your interest to sort of move up the scale. But as you move up the scale, obviously, the divide gets bigger. You're not in touch with the people at the ground level anymore. But the thing is that now there is a new person that's going to fill your spot. Hopefully, if the middle class keep on doing this and keep on taking people from a place of poverty, teaching these kind of skills, someone else takes their place as they move up on the ladder, right? And hopefully, with that, you obviously have a situation where that people start benefiting from this, right? As I mentioned, so we can obviously cut spending in luxury sectors, which will leave money for more disposable income. I think, as I mentioned here, and I said now, the gap between the rich and the poor only grows wider if the middle class keeps on fueling the elite instead of bringing those below them up. The only way to do that is that we as middle class people, or people which are able to listen to this, and because I think super rich people are just too busy to listen to this kind of discussion. But the only way to do it, they don't need strategies on how to improve their scorecard. They already know what they're doing, right? The only way that we, I guess, or the middle class can do that is to discipline and cut frivolous spending at the end of the day. Find ways of generating more income, as you say, by doing courses and starting small businesses and reading books, as you mentioned, to find out ideas and apply our creativity in these type of senses and situations to try something. Obviously, no one wants a situation where there is no spending at all, because obviously by cutting frivolous spending, and whenever there's some sort of pandemic, you do have a situation where people sort of hold money, and apparently that is bad. Not apparently, it is bad for the economy because money needs to flow, right? But we're not saying that people should cut spending out completely, but just spend your money on things that will generate money for you in the future.
Exactly, invest. Because if you only keep the money, then, like you said, it's not going to help the economy.
Exactly.
Money needs to flow. But if you invest in it, whether it's in the stock exchange or in a company you own, that's when you add value to something. And that's like, for people that do not know, if you're in the stock exchange, you just buy a small portion of a company.
Yes.
A small portion of Woolworths or something.
And then you're
partial owner.
Exactly. And that's something that people don't really understand when they say, well, I want to buy stocks, or people are buying stock or playing the stock market. All it is that, okay, fine. You have option to say, with my disposable income of, let's say, 500 Rand, can I start a business with it? Yes or no? Maybe you could. As I said, you start making cakes, or you buy ingredients, you make brownies, you sell them, and then you've got some extra income or something like that. Right? You got your small little business. Some people do not have time to start small businesses. Some people do not have the time to manage the people and stuff like that. But that's what the stock market is at the end of the day. Basically, you're saying is that company X, Apple, Tesla, some small local South African company is trying to generate income. And in order to generate income, they will also require money to, let's say, buy manufacturing or to buy equipment that will be used to make them more money. What I want to do is put my $500 into that company. And when they make more at the end of the day and they become more profitable, I will get something back. Obviously, you try to look for investment stocks which have more dividends, and also you pick the companies which are managed well and will do something that will basically be there in the future. That's why it's the same thing that Warren Buffett does. He invests in things like Coca-Cola, because when will Coca-Cola ever stop selling Coke? Who knows? Never. So that's the thing. He puts his money in Coca-Cola. He puts money into things he knows are going to be there. He doesn't invest in stuff like tech, because he doesn't know. He says Facebook could be there and could be gone tomorrow, so I'm not going to put money in Facebook. He also doesn't understand it. He's very old school in that approach. But basically, that's what investing is. It's either saying that, okay, fine, I've got money. I can either start a business with this little bit of money, or I can put it into someone else's business. And if they do well, I get something back.
Yeah. You mentioned a very important thing. You need to understand it. You also do not start a company if you don't understand what you like. If you don't understand making baking cookies, if you don't understand how it works and the whole idea behind it, it's a very stupid example, because everyone knows that everyone likes cookies.
Yeah.
Well, I like cookies. But yeah, the same with the stock exchange. If you buy a portion of a company, you need to understand what the company does. Is it overvalued? Is it undervalued? You need to understand those concepts, and then that's why it's sometimes easier for people just to buy a house, because a house is actually very easy to understand. Like, you buy a house, people rent that house, and get cash every single month. That's a very good example of an investment that people can understand. That's why a lot of people go into real estate, because real estate is easy to understand.
Oh, 100% agree with you. So in that, as well, as I said, we obviously need to cut frivolous spending in these sectors where they are not beneficial for us, because, as I said, at the end of the day, it's in your best interest to move your scoreboard. If I spend money on a luxury item, the only thing that's happening is that they move green and I go red. And that's in their best interest, and obviously that's not in my best interest. So the scoreboard, it really needs to be something that you're like, okay, cool. I really want to improve my scorecard, basically, on the scoreboard, right? I think one thing you also mentioned, which is really important, and I think sometimes it's also very hard to do though, but I really like the fact that you say that when you go to the grocery store, you look for companies that are South African based, so that at least you know that some of the money is somehow going to South African individuals. So one of the things that really surprises me, and the thing is that funny things, I used to work there, South African breweries was taken over by AB InBev, right? And the thing is that they're still using the whole South African brand, and they haven't changed anything and stuff like that. But majority of the money is going to a company called 3G Capital, which is based in Brazil. And South Africans drink a lot of beer. But none of that, every beer that you buy, you think, okay, yes, there are people which sort of benefit from it, like, the spas, the Pick and Pays, and maybe local taverns and all that kind of stuff. It's very hard to sort of say that all the money doesn't come back to SA. But obviously, the majority of the wealth at the end of the day will go back to other people.
There's a reason why a company from another country bought a company in South Africa.
Correct.
So the same way as people invest in companies, so countries do as well.
Yes.
So, and they invest with the idea of generating wealth for themselves.
And that's how it came about, because AB InBev was number 1 in the world. They said South African Breweries was number 2 in the world. And AB InBev says, well, if we can't grow anymore and there's a strong number 2 there, let's buy the number 2. And then all of a sudden we get a new number 2, not as strong as South African Breweries. And that's what they did at the end of the day, because that's the part where people think that, and I've worked there. AB InBev is run by investment bankers. All their decisions are financially based. They will tell you they care about the beer and all that kind of stuff. Yes, they adhere to safety standards at the end of the day, but every single decision that is made there about the value or the end product, which is how much money they're making. They're very, very, very vigilant about the scoreboard that they have there, how green they are, how much value they have, obviously, or how much value they provide to investors, how much, investors can obviously move the share price and stuff like that. Every decision that gets made there is a money decision. It's not about beer. It's not about anything else. Investment bankers just realize that there's a lot of money to be made in beer, so they're going to buy it. Yeah, so as I said, when we cut our frivolous spending, I guess at the end of the day, you hopefully ensure that smaller businesses can start up. And, even in South Africa, like this pandemic has obviously wrecked a lot of small businesses because, small businesses require people to be moving around. And I hope that more small businesses still pop up after this, they survive. Thing is, I think then again, at the end of the day, government don't really understand how important small businesses are to the economy. But they'll obviously learn that, or I guess we will learn that, because the taxpayers are going to have to basically cover the cost of that. But hopefully you'll have more businesses starting up because of, let's say, discussions like this and discussions that I had to say, well, how do we generate more income? How do we cut our expenses? Things that we do not need and will not benefit us at the end of the day. And, the one thing that I hear, and you have mentioned as well, to talk about, people talk about the pay gap and so many billionaires, minimum wages, 1, 2, 3, 4. One thing people need to realize is that taking money from the rich through taxes without playing this game well, which is cutting the expenses and stuff like that, will only do two things. One, government will get more money to put into its pocket and misuse. And two, the middle class will continue spending on things which don't benefit them. And that money will end up going back to the same people at the end of the day. So cut spending, inject money here, inject money into other small businesses and stuff. But the minute people can't control their spending on stupid things, the money's just going to flow back to the same individuals at the end of the day, because they're just sitting there waiting to say, okay, fine. We know that South Africans have a bad habit of buying clothes to impress their friends or buying fancy cars and stuff like that. So let the money go disappear, fine, take it from us and put it into their hands. And what's going to happen is that they're not going to change their spending habits, and it's going to come back here. And we'll make more profits again. We'll make it more desirable for them, because now they think, okay, fine, I've got this extra money. And they'll make it more desirable for them to be like, oh, so you got this extra money, right? You deserve to get a A-class instead of, your normal Ford Figo. And the person's like, you know what, I do deserve an A-class. And what's going to happen? More money is going to come back into their pockets again, and they're going to keep on winning because they know how to play the game. They are moving the score. What's as important is the scorecard, how it is, the strategies, as we've mentioned, that you use in order to move the scoreboard, or change the score, is up to you. You need to look at a lot of things. As I said, your background, what it is that you can do, your opportunities, certain things that are legal, realize where the dangers are in the legal side and stuff like that. Employ people, as you mentioned, the rich people employ people to know what the rules are, how to break them, or how not to get caught and stuff like that. But yeah, whatever strategy it is that you need at the end of the day, it's still going to come down to one, how much money can you generate? How much expense can you cut? It boils down to that thing at the end of the day. Those are the only things that move the scoreboard. And I guess at the end of the day, the goal is that more middle class people play the game because they are able to play the game at a comprehensible level. And by playing the game better, they are able to lift up the poor. And I think the list of, I think you mentioned obviously that you just searched on Google and you found ways of which you can invest, and you can find everything there. As I mentioned, I'm not an expert in this thing, but there are 7 or 9 books that I actually recommend that people can read about the subject. And I need to go read into them now with this knowledge that I've built through solving this problem around, gamifying it, to say. I think the one book is The Richest Man in Babylon. It's an ancient book, but apparently it's also about the same thing, cutting your expenses, investments and things which are tried and tested. I think they suggest that you invest in farms and gold and, property. Basically for them, they're like, well, those things will, in any pandemic, like those things will reign supreme. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is very famous. The second,
that's a classic example.
Yeah. The other one that follows on to that one is Rich Dad's Cash Flow Quadrant. Basically, he highlights the fact that you will never become wealthy if you are renting your time for money, meaning that you obviously have a wage. The best ways in which you earn more money. So obviously you can get an income through wage. To earn more money, the next step is obviously to start a small business. The other step, I think, is around investing. But basically, at the end of the day, you want to be in a different quadrant. You want to be in the investing quadrant, because while you sleep, money is being made. The other one is called Show Your Work, which is more specifically for creative people. Basically, it's about how creative people can be found through starting. It's about personal branding. Personal branding can help you land a job. It can help you get a different gig. But that doesn't mean anything if you don't actually use the income that you get from your gigs to generate, let's say, some sort of income to either get more or to, if you don't cut your spending, that really doesn't really help. But Show Your Work is basically for the creatives, I think. One book I'm reading at the moment is super long, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which is some angel investor. And he's also in the investing quadrant because, yeah, he's like, well, he's built companies from scratch. Now he just listens to people. They give him ideas. He gives them money. They make a lot of money. He also makes a lot of money. He's happy. He doesn't have to do a lot of, obviously, except for evaluate the person in the beginning. He's using time the most efficiently. I mentioned earlier Dave Ramsey's 7 Baby Steps, which basically goes to show how this guy changed his situation from having a negative net worth and losing everything to being plus $10 million. And he's happy with that. He doesn't need to try and be a billionaire or anything like that. He's happy with $10 million. I think you would be happy with $10 million. I would be happy with $10 million. So there's nothing wrong with listening to his advice. And I think he did it from the age of 29. So he was able to change the situation from the age of 29. And if you look at him now, he's fat and happy. So he's really good. I guess this is very technical. I've tried to read it. I'm still going to read it again. The Intelligent Investor, written by Benjamin Graham, who was Warren Buffett's mentor and lecturer at university. So that goes into the ins and outs of investing. As you said, how do you evaluate a company? How do you find out that it's profitable? How do you know if it's a good thing to actually go, put your money in that stock? There's a South African book called How to Make Your First Million, which also talks about the same thing. And the nice thing about that one is that it is catered towards South Africa. So they'll talk about the property market in South Africa. But it's also the same thing. Basics are cut your expenses, generate as much money as you can, and whatever's left, put in have an emergency fund, and whatever's left, basically put it into the investment market or buy a property and stuff. And it goes through all the investment opportunities or investment vehicles that are available in South Africa. ETFs, stocks, bonds, government bonds, fixed-term investments and stuff. It goes through all the opportunities that are available in South Africa. And I need to reread that. Like, I have to read all of these again, especially after a discussion like this. And then the other one, obviously, I think more geared towards business people, which is Your Unfair Advantage. And that's the one which basically says that there are 5 advantages every single person has. Some of them are education, some of them location. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but there are 5 advantages every person has. And they need to look at that if they want to basically say, well, how can I use my advantage to generate some sort of income?
I think it's something about quite well. So read those books.
9 books, it's a lot, but as you mentioned as well, I think it's in books. And I wish I have read, but the thing is, as you said, like, I think as a kid, you have the habit of reading for the sake of reading. But now as you get older, you're like if you're not applying this stuff, and sometimes you need to wrap your head around certain things. And when a concept sort of lands in your head, you're like, oh, I need to go back and reread these things with this new lens or new perspective that I have. And a lot of that came from the discussion or preparation for this discussion. I realized that I need to go back to these books to be like, okay, cool. Like, how do I move my scorecard? And that's just based off the research that we did. And I just realized, well, I should have done this longer.
I think, at least with me, the fact is that you know about these things. Yeah. Like, these things have, like, you hear them quite a lot, but it's about taking that step.
Yeah.
And I think it's that impatience that you sometimes have, that it's going to take so long. And then I think that's another thing that people, short-term gratification. Buying clothes on debt gives you more pleasure than the idea that over 10 years you can own your own house. And yeah.
No, I'm definitely guilty of that one. Because I like to look good and stuff like that. And that's where hopefully, and I know obviously when I get back to SA, like with a change in the wardrobe and stuff like that and seasons, I'm definitely going to spend some money on clothes. But to try and minimize that is a difficult thing because we like to look good at the end of the day, but we don't have to look good every single time. Obviously, there's certain functions, occasions. And I think also that's another thing, when Emil and I, we watched obviously quite a lot of Netflix and we got into the whole minimalism thing. And it's through minimalism that we realized there's a lot of things that we don't need. And there's a lot of things that we don't need to keep on buying at the end of the day. And that has helped. But the thing is, it's a journey for everyone else. And some people will listen to this and they'll say, well, Marcel and I are talking crap. And then, maybe 2 years down the line, they'll be like, well, now I'm in that situation. I'm in that boat. Like the same thing. Some of these books I read for the sake of reading them, and I wasn't in the right frame of mind, or I was thinking maybe there's going to be one hit wonder or something like that will, shoot me to the next stratosphere, or I just need to find the right job and then things will change and stuff like that. But no, it's at the end of the day, everything came to my spending. That's how I can change something. And then after I can cut my spending, I have got more income or something that's left over. And then it's what I choose to do with that will make the difference. I can put that into spending clothes. And for a very long time, I was in a good situation because of having a good job and stuff. I wouldn't buy clothes on credit. I could go into a shop and buy it and be like, okay, cool, I can buy these clothes. And it wasn't on credit, so I wasn't in a bad situation. But I wasn't buying things that would move my scorecard to a degree.
I've got a question for you, just to make it applicable for people watching this. I can imagine people are asking now, okay, what is a significant thing that you cut out of your routine daily life that is saving you money?
So I think I think one thing that I cut out was, like you said, subscription-based things. So cell-phone contract. Like when that fell away, like it was just like, yeah, it was an extra $600, but like it's an extra $600. So cell-phone contract was a big thing. What else? Retail, because the thing is, I always knew that I would have income at the end of the day. So like I think, like I still remember when I went to Richards Bay, like sometimes I'll be like, oh well, I want a new wardrobe, like not for the sake of it, but I was just like, I want some new shoes or some new things, and I'll go get it on the the card. So like I think it was the Fashini Group, so my Total Sports card, knowing that I could buy it, but I was just like, oh, I want to keep the money on the side, and this is only 300 or 400 rand per month that I have to pay every month for however long it is. So let me do that. I can still have the illusion that I've still got extra money because I'm not buying it on, I'm not taking out of my whatever's left in my current account. And the problem is that by doing that, and the reason I got into that habit was because I didn't have a credit record, so I needed to buy a car. And they said the easiest way to get a credit record is to get a retail card. And then it shows that you can pay something per month. And then I was like, okay, cool. Let me go do that, buy some stuff. And while I was there, I was like, oh, I can get 7,000 rand. I'm like, okay. Like I only came to buy socks to prove that I can pay it off. But while I'm here, I might as well take a pair of shoes. And well, that pair of pants at home, my tracksuit pants, like, yeah, they're good, but these Nike ones are quite nice. I think I'll enjoy these ones a lot more. So definitely retail was a big one. And two, as I said, subscription. So it was cell phone contract. Yeah. So those two were the big things for me. You?
Yeah. No, definitely subscription. Anything subscription based, I cut out of my life. Like Netflix, don't have Netflix. Anything that's subscription based, I don't have. Like Netflix for me is when if I go into the movies. So when I go visit someone and they've got Netflix, it reminds me of my youth when we didn't have the STD at home. Every time we would visit someone else that had TV, it's like, God, you can watch TV. That's saying with Netflix. That's a bit extreme example, but
no, but there's certain things where like they just, you can't escape it. Like I know, like if I had to tell Imola to try cut spending on food, like she'll kill me. She's a foodie at the end of the day. She likes to eat nicely and stuff like that. And they are going to be guilty pleasures. And my current guilty pleasures are things like tech. So I've still got that urge for tech, but it's a lot better. Like I don't need to buy the latest.
No, I'm absolutely not a frugal type of guy. I just know what I like, and everything that's not that important to me, I just don't. I'm not gonna pay extra just for the sake of having it because everyone else has it. But just be aware of those expenses. And I like that I'm going out and I don't have to worry about how much it costs. So that's one of my things that I like to have. So yeah, like you mentioned, like Mola on her food and you with tech. Everyone has there's one thing that they want to splurge on.
Yeah.
But you don't have to splurge on everything.
Yes.
So what I generally do with my income and I just give percentages to everything. That makes it then I don't even have to worry about anything anymore. So I say then 20% on this, 30% on that, 40% on this, and then yeah, and then this 10% that's left is it's just an extra thing that you can. So you can, depending on these percentages, like you said at the beginning, that everyone's going to determine their scorecard in the end. I can go super frugal now and be a millionaire in 5 to 10 years, or I can just live a bit more now and then have less money in the future. But that's what people need to know, that the actions you take today has consequences for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And if you're fine with that, that's all what it is. But the game is not to be as rich as possible. For some people it is. For most people it's just to have enough money to live a life that you're comfortable with.
And that's what I'm saying. When it comes to game theory, there are three important values. It's now one, the number of players. Obviously, if you're in a game is between 2 players or anything more than that. The second parameter is the actions that you take, which is something that you mentioned right now. And the third one is your utility preference. Your utility preference is basically to say that, well, this is the result and how do I perceive that result? Am I happy with it? Am I not happy with it? As you mentioned, like, you do get utility results of 0, where a Khoisan is like, well, if I'm green or red, like, that doesn't mean much to me. So you definitely, the most important thing is your preference to whatever it is the score is, whatever the result is. Your preference to that will determine what your actions are going to be. And that's how people, I guess, study games, to say, well, yeah, this is the outcome, and how do I react to that? And do I prefer it or not prefer it? And what can I take to obviously to change that? And money and capitalism at the end of the day, definitely. And it's just so weird. Like, not that it took so long for me to come up to this conclusion, but I guess it's a lot of things have been just maybe been processing in my head. And this was the one, point in time where I was like, I get it. I know how everything fits in. Because like, you can learn things in silos, but it's with the time that it all fits in, and you're like, okay, cool. Like, they're fundamental truths of it. And that also happened, I guess, because of the podcast and the blog post I was writing this week, which was about how to learn. And even in that, it was looking at how Elon Musk learns, which was, that first principle method, which is problem solving based and stuff like that. So it's through this discussion and the problem that we had, and it just fused at the perfect time. Now, like you can simplify it to fundamental truths. And at the end of the day, when it comes to wealth, the fundamental truth is, if you want wealth, it's supposed to be more. You basically generate more income than what you spend. Then you're good. Like, there's nothing more than that. You can obviously have different multiple models and advanced equations and other stuff like that, but it's going to come down to that. Like, even if you're evaluating a business, you can look at the income statement, right? The income statement says, well, this is how much we earn, this is how much we spent, and this is our net. And there's nothing more basic than that. There's nothing more fundamental than that at the end of the day.
Yeah. If the company's in the green, it's doing well.
Yeah.
In the red, it's not doing well.
Yeah, will it continue to go in the red? Or are they going to change their strategy so they continue going in the green or something like that?
Yeah.
And that's the same way you're going to pick a stock. Okay, fine. Are they green? Are they red? Are they green? Okay, cool. Are they going to continue to be green in the future? Yes. Okay, fine. Invest. If not, or you're not sure, then hey, like, pull out. And then it's less gambling. It's more mathematics, I guess.
Yeah.